on Thursday, 15th of January at 9:45. Welcome everyone. Before I start, there's a protocol I need to read through, which requires doing it right now. All visitors must sign into the visitor book at the entrance to Bill Craig's. This includes council staff from all the buildings. There is no planned fire evacuation drill or alarm test today. So if the fire alarm is activated during your visit, you must exit the building immediately. The council officers will direct you to the nearest fire exit and will escort visitors to the building fire assembly point beside the Silver Man at the top of Parliament Walk. Kilcraig staff should report to their floor's assembly point. You should remain at your assembly point until directly reoccupy the building and only re-enter once the fire marshal has advised it is safe to do so. Please do not attempt to leave the site by vehicle until cleared to do so by the fire marshal to ensure that access routes are kept clear for emergency vehicles. Please note that this is a public meeting and that members of the public may be in attendance. The meeting will also be recorded by the clerk and published online for public viewing after the meeting. Otherwise, the taking of photographs, including screenshots, audio or video recordings, are not permitted during the meeting unless with the express permission of the chair. And members attending virtually activate their cameras where possible to enable you to join by video. Can all attendees mute their microphones when not speaking? Please do not come in during items unless I invite you to do so. If members attending virtually wish to speak on any point, please indicate by clicking on the raise your hand button. Members in the chamber should also raise their hands, and I will bring you in at an appropriate time. If members have not been able to access all papers for the meeting, please indicate now. I will now ask the clerk to confirm attendance at the standing committee. I would ask that the members indicate if they wish to declare an interest. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I understand in item 4 that the Clackmannshire Heritage Trust is going to be making a representation today, and I have to declare that I'm a board member of Clackmannshire Heritage Trust. And many of you know my passion for heritage. I've consulted with the Launch Office and I've filled out a declaration of interest form, and because I understand from the planning officers that most of the debate today in section 75 may relate to that heritage aspect, I'm afraid that I will have to absence myself from the vote and the discussion because of that interest on the board.
Thank you, Councillor, for that. I will also declare that on the 19th of December I visited Resonate at my own request. As a ward councillor, my interest was purely in activities of Resonate, and our discussions did not include anything that had been for decision making today. So for that reason, I don't feel I need to recuse myself from this. Any other declarations of interest? And the roll call, I think, is fairly full. Councillor Benny is the only one listening, all right? Councillor Earl, is he online? Nothing from Councillor Earl or Councillor Benny, is that right? Everyone else is here. Good, thanks. Right. Item 3, confirming the minutes of the meetings. Yes, yes. I made an insert. The clerk will now give a little intro on the code of conduct and how it affects today's meeting.
Thank you very much, Chair. After the training session yesterday on the section 36 application and before the committee today, and for those who were unable to attend, this is a reminder of the Council's code of conduct in relation to lobbying. I know that some of you have been lobbied by the agent for the section 36 application for the wind farm. And this is one of the decisions that the elected members are being made or asked to be made today. The information you've received from the agents acting for the applicant have not been verified by any of the officers within the council, and elected members we would request that elected members should not give any weight to the information that was sent to them. I would expect such agents to understand the requirement of elected members' compliance with the Code of Conduct, but I would advise them if they wish to review these, they can be found on the Standards Commission Councillors' Code of Conduct. In terms of the Code of Conduct, I would point elected members of the committee to Section 6 in lobbying and access, and Section 7 taking decisions on quasi-judicial or regulatory applications, which is what this committee is. Code 6 and 5 deal with lobbying, and Code 6.5 is specific to quasi-judicial and regulatory matters, which pretty much confirms that the councillors will have regards to the code. In terms of Section 7, advise that individual or organisation that you cannot formulate an opinion or support their position if you're going to take part in the decision-making of a matter. Direct any representation you receive to the appropriate council employee or department, which was actually done in this case, which is why it's been brought to my attention. I won't go through these other aspects of the code. They're there to go through at your leisure, but it's really an important one to note in terms of lobbying. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Clark. Right, moving on to item 3A on the agenda, the minutes of the meeting of the Planning Committee held here on Thursday, 11th of September. They are in front of me now. Just through my page of time. If there are any errors or omissions or corrections, please raise your hand and we will address them. So that's page 5 of the papers. And page 6. Okay. Do we approve the minutes? We do. Item 3B, the minutes of the special meeting of the Planning Committee held here on Tuesday, the 28th of October at 9:30. Page 7 on the papers. And page 8. The minutes. Will we approve these? Did we approve these? We do. Item 4. This is the application for planning permission in principle for a proposed mixed-use development consisting of predominantly residential uses and business, education and other ancillary uses, together with associated access and infrastructure and landscaping works on the former Carthbridge distillery and warehouse site. And this report will be given to us by Jacob Mullin. Jacob.
Okay, Chair. So the application is the same as that previously given mandate to approve by the Planning Committee back in 2023. It's the same application, but although the previous mandate to approve all significant weight, the application had to be reassessed and rebalanced against the development plan as it did not materialise to a legal decision notice. And in between time, a number of material changes took place that required a set of new conditions to be drafted and changes to the heads and terms for the legal agreements those previously accepted by the committee here. The application is for permission in principle only. It remains live. We now believe that we're in a position to move forward and recommend approval again. So this is subject to a new set of conditions and the updated heads and terms, which are in the appendices.
The slide shows we're okay.
Might just be a time delay, so I'll just run through it. So as you can see, and as you're probably aware, the site is the brownfield former distillery site. Proposal is for a mixed-use development as the chair has described, so predominantly residential housing, residential uses, associated business with some education use and ancillary uses as well. There is an indicative master plan which shows the main access is to be off of B909, the same as the previous mandate to approve master plan. There will be other access points and an active travel scheme which will run both within and out of the site. As noted in the report, development will increase traffic on the roads, and where there's increased traffic, there can be an increased risk to members of the public. To try and mitigate the risks, however, a number of measures have been proposed through the legal agreement to ensure that these impacts remain at an acceptable level. These are likely to include new crossings and improved access and travel infrastructure, but will need to go through other consent processes, and the draft legal agreement makes provision for this. As the land was allocated by the council for development up to 390 new homes, and the number here is 490, so it's above what we allocated. We are also suggesting that when the technical assessment is done at that threshold at 390 homes, so that we can reassess and measure the impact that's had on the traffic network at that point, and whether or not any further mitigation is required. The site does have a mix of neighbours, so these include residential properties on Hilton Road and on Carsbridge Road, heading up towards Jellyhull Farm, and the commercial site at Cooperage Way Business Park. I'm sorry, the slides are not matching there. Got slow than I am today. So Harvey House and Oval House form part of the development site and central to the development. They currently occupied by referred sector organisations, which include Resonate Together and others such as TCV. The buildings here are to remain in business and educational use, and are going to stay as is moving forward. There are a number of listed assets within the site. You may be aware of the history, or hope you're aware of the history of the demolition of Carsbridge House pictures here, as resulted in separate police action being pursued. This case is still live, 3 people being charged, and the next steps lie with the physical. This is being looked at separately through the criminal justice system and not through the planning application. And to be clear, we're not approving the loss of Carsbridge House today. The contribution that Carsbridge House made to the sense of place is irreparable, and the value that the historic asset had cannot be replaced. However, the developer is seeking to make the faithful reconstruction of the demolished listed building, and we're proposing conditions for the reuse of its materials, methodology to be agreed, and a legal agreement to back this up. The faithful reconstruction does show some understanding of loss that's occurred in terms of the character and the history of the area, and will go somewhere in repairing some of the damage. We're also proposing conditions on the wall garden and Mill House to the west of the former house, with the proposal suggesting that this will form a community grown area. The Napoleon Villa shown here, which was next to the house, has been relocated. There is the ability through the legal agreement to seek its relocation again, should the council decide to do this. It is shown that the Treeland Avenue is now to remain, which did not feature in the previous master plan, and further landscape details are to be provided at the detailed plan stage. The information submitted suggests that the main groups of trees on the site will be retained, with new planting proposed, particularly in the southern areas, and there's also tree protection orders covering development parts of the site. So trees, along with lawn, form part of the biodiversity considerations for this site. The committee have already made a decision in terms of biodiversity on this site, and I'll have to look at this again. The application is supported by a trees report and ecology report, which in terms of the pond, suggests that this is species core. We're considered raised by residents in the environment side when the pond was drained, but it does appear that the pond was formed due to a depression in the land and issues with drainage. Although large, it is shallow and water quality isn't good. What the new master plan does indicate is that a new pond will be introduced close to this area, so in the southern part of the site, and albeit smaller, it is going to be planted up with improved biodiversity, which along with the deculverting of the Brockley Burn, which runs in the northern aspect, could increase biodiversity across the site as a whole. So, as part of the legal agreement, the developer will be required to upgrade active travel routes. This will likely include core paths, so those are the ones that head towards Jellyhull Farm, and the one known as Caps Close, which runs alongside the site, where Brockley Burn is already visible. So this is in the opposite side of the Castleford roundabout, and there will be a function within the legal agreement to look at creating safe routes, safe walking routes to school. So as part of this process, other established rights of way are also likely to be looked at, but these require discussions with landowners to create more direct routes, particularly to Deer Park Primary School. And again, there is an element of the legal agreement which will allow us to open those discussions. As seen earlier, on that route from Cheltenham Farm, cows do park when we run up to Cheltenham Farm use the area for recreation purposes. The master plan suggests few camping areas for recreational uses will be introduced. As noted, the application is supported by an illustrative master plan which demonstrates how the site could be comprehensively redeveloped and integrated with its surroundings. I will zoom in a second. Although this is indicative, we have based suggested conditions and the draft legal agreement on this in combination with the documents that support the application. So looking at this, there appears to be three areas of the site. So the area above Carsfield Road, the area to the north of the B999 and the area to the south. So starting from the bottom, so from the south, we can see there that they, sorry, I'll give the screen a second. There we go. So starting from the south, we can see that they're looking to introduce the landscaping buffer alongside the railway line. That sud there is identified as being a new pond. And they're also looking at introducing a new bridge across the railway line. All of these elements will be covered either in the detailed design stage or through the legal agreement. In the central part of the site to the north of the B999, they're looking at opening up the burn. So Brofrid Burn at the moment is culverted for much of its route. So this will introduce a new naturalised watercourse. And I should highlight that they are looking to bring in new areas of open space. So proposed multi-use play area, which will need to be a full-size football pitch. There are some further assessments that are required. Lots of this is indicative, so the areas that are shown in red circles, there where we believe there to be potential coal mining, previous coal mining activity. So the detailed assessments will inform the detailed design when it gets to the next stages. You can also see there as well relocation of the Napoleon pillar, which has been relisted in its current position next to the years ago. In terms of northern aspects of the site, the master plan indicates that we keep the tree line avenue and all those trees are protected by a tree protection order. You can see the Carsbridge House is the location where it's to be rebuilt, and to the left of that, to the west of that, you can see the walled garden, which is identified to be as a community growing area. So, in summary, the application is the same as that previously put before committee with the management group to approve decision in 2023. It's the same site and the same description. We did have a requirement to be assessed and rebalanced due to the material changes, particularly the demolition of Carsbridge House and the relocation of the pillar. The heads of terms and the conditions have also changed to reflect those changes, so that's why we brought it back before committee. And the National Housing Emergencies only increase the need for new housing in this area. The previous mandate to approve is a significant consideration. but there are improvements as described there in terms of the master plan and the legal agreement. So I'll pass back over to Chair.
Thank you, Jason. We'll now take questions from councillors on the paper. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. Although this was previously amended to approve, there have been quite a few interior changes since then. In particular, 9A, the suggested amount of housing, 490 as opposed to 354.
Sorry, councillor. So 490 was on the previous decision. So the deviation there is from what the council had allocated it for in 2015. So in 2015, the area to the north of Garsbridge Road and to the north of B909 were allocated for housing, 390. The site to the south of the B909 was allocated for commercial use. So there hasn't been a change in the number of houses in between that period, between the application in 2021 and now.
Thanks, Chair. Excuse me. The affordable housing, concerns me that while National Plan Framework of 4 suggests 25%, and obviously 25% suggested in here, with no confirmation from the developer whether that's agreeable. And you suggested the housing crisis. The housing crisis, I would suggest, is more pertinent to affordable and social housing in Clackmannanshire than it is to private developments. So I would like to see a more formal commitment from the developer to say, yes, that will definitely be compliant with the report. And also a point where that condition would be triggered. Because it's at the moment it seems that it's quite open-ended and wait for hundreds of houses to be built before we see any social housing being built on that side. So I would have liked to see a better indication of that.
Thank you, councillor. So 25% is our point, it's our starting point whenever we look at entering into negotiations. So the position was taken in 2023 that there might not be sufficient evidence to defend ourselves at appeal based on the outcome of other sides. And although the evidence that we've got has increased, we still don't have adopted housing need demand assessment. And the policy position that we've got here is the same as it was in 2023. So we assessed this application against NPF4, we assessed it against the local development plan. So, but that doesn't mean that there's not going to be any affordable housing, because we feel that there is a need. So it's a two-part process. It's a two-part process. So if we haven't adopted housing need demand assessment, we can go ahead and use those figures. It's within the legal agreement. So although I can't give you a number today, we have got evidence and we are taking that to the Scottish Government, and hopefully they'll come back and tell us that's robust and credible and we can move forward on that. That could be higher or lower than the 25% that's stated there, so I can't give you anything fixed. If we get to a point where the developer, where we haven't adopted something, it then goes back on the developer. There's a second legal agreement to enter into, and the developer has to do their own assessment of the Alloa market area, and then we assess their assessment effectively. So all I can put in place as a guarantee is that the affordable housing on this site is going to be on an evidence-based need. So whether that's our evidence or their evidence that we assess, starting point is 25% in NPF4. the number might go up or down. I can't give you any certainty of what it will be.
Thanks, Jacob. We have one more, Chair. Thanks. Rotherham. I live on the banks of the Rotherham. And on my side of the road, on the other side of the road, it regularly floods. I just want to make sure that there isn't going to be any further risk of further flooding in the downstream of Rotherham as a result of this development, because it's already quite tenuous. Thanks.
So I will pass it over to Stuart in a second. Steve provided not raised any concerns in terms of deep overs in that burn, and our roads team, I think we're supportive of that. There is potential to reduce flood risk by doing that. I will pass over to Stuart because he's the technical expert in this area.
In my recollection of the analysis that was carried out in 2021, the flood risk showed that the deculverting of Brothley Long would reduce flood risk. If there's any, and I would still be that would be the case, because obviously you're not constraining flows in a pipe. That's to be designed and accommodated within the new development. So I'm pretty confident that we'll see a reduced flood risk generally as a consequence of design flows and call it Brothley Long. That's probably the case further downstream as well. You know, as we head towards into Arles, basically we're providing more areas where flood waters can be stored safely before they then make their way further down. So pretty confident. The thing I would say is that there may be a need to revisit the flood risk assessment, given there's been a very length of time between it when it was previously produced and now, and the industry moves on and greater account is taken for climate change, for example. So might need to sort of have consideration for a revised flood risk assessment page, which would inform whether there's enough area set aside to allow flood waters to be stored. So that might be a technical point to be dealt with for them.
Thanks, Julie.
Councillor Norton, next, Councillor McLaughlin.
Questions. So the first one, I just wanted to just double check 3.25 NHS programme response received. So my understanding is that we do have a new process that I helped to put in place to make sure the communication with NHS Forth Valley is there, but we didn't go back and consult with them because the material change wasn't in this aspect. Is that correct?
Yes, so obviously consulted back, I think way back in 2021, when the application came back in, there was no response. We made mandatory approve decision on the basis that there was no response back in 2023. So it wasn't considered reasonable to reconsult at that point, given that we'd already put forward heads of terms and let the developer know that and got to that mandatory approved decision. The policy position hasn't changed, so that's another reason why we haven't gone back out to reconsult, unless it was a major change in that area.
Mic off, Jacob.
So just to kind of reassure public that going forward, any future applications, we have got that kind of communication with NHS Forth Valley sorted, so that we should not receive no response in future.
Yes, so we are consulting with the NHS on applications that require that, and they are responding to us now, and we are working with them with the local development plan as well. So it's progressing in this.
So as we know, I have an issue with monoblocking and the use of that in developments. Can I just confirm that part of that and my grumpiness towards that will get hashed out on the detailed plans, which is that correct, rather than this moment? Just want to make sure that I don't miss my spot to put all of my arguments against and so monoblocking and developments.
Yes, so the materials and the design are part of the detailed design process. So these will come forward potentially with the design code and the first phase of the development, which will then set the precedent for the rest of the site. So that will be the point at which we're approving the details, approving the materials. We can't, well, yeah, so we'll look at them on blocking at that time.
Also, you brought up about ponds. I've always noticed swans going there, and they like to go back to the same bit that they went to, even though I know we're saying that the current bit doesn't have that great biodiversity. Well, we can put something in place to make sure that they're not kind of disturbing that during the kind of taking the migration or the breeding periods of the small birds. I'm not huge on that period and how that works, but I just want to have kind of assurance that obviously we're not going to disturbing the birds that would use it just now.
So birds may, I'm not 100% certain on swans, but birds sometimes have protections in places. All birds when breeding have protections in place for rural areas a lot. The idea of locating the new pond close to the old pond is that if there are any migratory birds, that they will be able to come back to the same area and find water. In terms of biodiversity of the site as a whole, that's how we've assessed it. How it's being presented to us in terms of the ecology reports. So there will be more opportunities for biodiversity in terms of more walk courses, working with Rothburn, ponds, and we can also condition things like planting to make them species rich rather than what they are at the moment.
You said that obviously there's protection for birds, but no by what's actually happening and if there's no investigation on that site on something that did have protection. Is there anything that we can do more to ensure that, going forward, the things that are protected because this was shown that there's not been much care taken to previous protections
Yes, so condition A is a requirement for a fairly global impact assessment. And for that to take place every 2 years until the relevant phase of that development is implemented. So an ecological impact assessment will measure the impacts on wildlife, but should also give mitigation. And when it comes to the detailed phases, we can introduce conditions based on the back of that new information.
Just they didn't adhere to what they should do. Would it be Nature Scott that would take food forward, or would it be ourselves? Or just the parents?
Yeah, it depends. So if it's a breach of condition, so this condition says no development shall commence on site. So nothing can happen until that ecological impact assessment is undertaken. Breach of condition would be us. If it's impact on wildlife directly, especially protected species, then Nature Scott.
Next one is also when you did the kind of master plan and said the play area, is it going to be an equipped play area as well? Just there's been confusion on previous applications as to what play area actually means and what scope of it. So I just wanted to confirm if that will be an equipped one. And that then come through like the detailed planning stage and would it come back as a planning committee in regards to the play area.
So in terms of play areas, again, there's a condition for that in terms of getting the details up front and us assessing them. Yes, we would assess the detail. In terms of it coming back to the planning committee, that will depend on how the phases development and what the thresholds are. So if it's above 49 houses, then it would come back to the planning committee. You would see the full details. If they decide to phase it below that, which they may do, then it would be for officers to make that technical assessment.
Yeah, to come back to planning committee if they were below the threshold.
Sorry, would you repeat the question?
Could I ask for it to come back to planning committee if it doesn't meet the threshold?
Yes, you can request planning applications to come back to the committee and then the decision lies with the chair.
I remember we've seen, I think, that the previous scheme was kind of different designs, and I thought one for Carsbridge was a kind of fan view rather than a corridor view. I don't know, does anybody recall that kind of, you had the house and then the land was a fan rather than the corridor? Can't remember what was designed, but I just recall us talking about a kind of fan view rather than that corridor view, because I think we were worried that if there was buildings. Sorry, yeah, I don't know if this is. Because I remember that it was that way of that if it was that kind of corridor view that you wouldn't then see cars, the house, it would be, even though it was kind of elevated and depending on the level of the buildings in front of it. I just remember that discussion. I can't exactly remember what was agreed or whether it was, again, it was going to come back at a later stage. So that's just, I was just kind of concerned about that.
So in terms of the avenue, the avenue is already existing. So there's trees along that avenue, protecting trees, the category A, B, which are your highest quality of tree, so to speak. So I think the fact that those trees may remain is really good for us. In terms of use of the house, I'm not too sure, but from my recollection, they were going to get rid of the tree line avenue that's currently in place and just plant a new tree line avenue. What I would say about this is it is a planning commission in principle. The detailed design can change. There's still lots of assessments to be done, which will, map out where the houses are going to go, where all the facilities are going to go. So all we're approving here is the location plan and the description of development. The master plan that's put before you, although it's being guided in terms of conditions and the legal agreement, it's indicative, so it can change, it might change. We're literally just agreeing those two things, so it's the location plan and the description.
Are we able to go back and check those kind of the previous things? I'm positive, it's like, I don't think I'm okay, I don't think it's something that would come into my brain that, talking about the fan views that we talked about in the previous one. Are we able to kind of go back to make sure that is taken into account when we go to that kind of decision stage?
Well, I think we can. I think what Jason's saying is that we're not discussing that level of detail at this point. We're not making any decisions based on detail. But those kind of matters will be discussed at the next phasing stages. This is only for planning commission. So if we keep our question about into the more general aspects of the development, that might be more relevant at this stage, but what you're asking is fair enough, but maybe at the next stage of the process.
Okay. So I just, at the last one we had a motion to be forward, and I just wanted to check, it was to for request for the section 75 agreement provides for enhanced provision of car parking in the landscape master plan to significantly increase parking requirements for new replacement Carsbridge House, proposed wall garden, a new cultural centre incorporating Opal House and Harvey House complex, and also there's a fourth one that said for enhanced contribution to enable the restoration of the Opal and Harvey House complex to provide for the proposed community campus for the heritage and the arts. Just wanted to check that that is in there because I don't think it's detailed in the paper.
Yeah, so it comes in under the ends of terms, yeah, I haven't gone into details. So in terms of the enhanced contribution, I'm working from the bottom up. Yeah, so it's moved from £10,000 to £15,000. That's a draft legal agreement, it's not signed at this moment in time. In terms of, I think the third one was securing the use, is that correct?
Yeah, for the car.
So they're looking at keeping Oracle House and Abbey House in that business, it's learning use. There are conditions on the wall garden and what it will be used for. In terms of the enhanced car parking, that's not in section 75 agreement, I would say, but that's a decision taken because that will be looked at in the detailed design, and the indication of the master plan is that there will be new car parking facilities for recreational use in that area. I can bring up the plan together. Let's see. Would you like to say?
Oh, right, no, it's fine, I won't let you
Yeah.
have to do the, so, that's.
Thank you, councillor Ball. Councillor McCracken.
Thanks, Chair. Just in terms of education, I know earlier on in the application process for this site, there was a suggestion that it would be an area of land for a new school, which I realise has moved on to expansion of the existing Deer Park Primary School. So in terms of any developer contribution for that, has there been any discussion so far on whether that's likely to be a fixed amount? Are we looking at a percentage of any future bill costs? Because there could be quite a variance between the two then. Just what's the sort of current position on that?
Yes, so we're taking guidance from the Education Service on this. It's looking like both parties want to agree a fixed contribution to just under 2.1 million. That's for the expansion of the school. There's also the learning centre and the childcare centre, and an additional contribution of 672,000 on that. Again, that is the draft legal agreement. It's not signed yet, but that's the discussions that we've been having. That's what Education have said it will cost, and that is what the applicants are saying that they will agree to.
Perfect, thanks.
Councillor Fairley.
Thanks, Chair. I know the previous application concerns around the traffic. I know that those concerns are enough of us for progress on this. And I recognise that there's further detail in there about what the steps are that they plan to take to try to alleviate some of the concerns around that. Stop with public transport, potential for public transport. Is that something in relation to the train line? Is that the only part of public transport change that we're talking about?
So that's an active travel route, and the safeguarding of the land to put in a potential footbridge. No, so there is the potential as well to include bus stops within the site. They have put forward a programme, a plan of where the bus stops may be located, but that would come in at a stage, and it would also need other consents from colleagues in roads and changes to routes and things that are outweigh the planning process. So there is provision in terms of being able to get buses through the site, but yeah, it's up to the consensus.
Yeah, I suppose the potential exists for the site to accommodate a bus route, but these are things that would be really far down the line and would require discussion and agreement with the applicant and their agents. And well, I haven't gone through the detail of the transportation assessment. I think the fact that we've got there's a requirement for a further transportation assessment is quite important, because that gives us the opportunity to revisit that and then make a case with the applicant that transport accommodation needs to be more fully considered. I think this is not something really saying sorry.
So thanks. And the inclusion of the travel routes and reference to number of new crossings there are very welcome. They help in moving the pedestrian traffic rather than there's 490 houses we're talking about going into What's already pretty congested, main roundabout and out of that area. The traffic, I'm not sure I see anything in this tackles on that. I do recognise that the applicant talks about the physical constraints at key junctions that limit scope effective enforcement capacity improvements. The stuff that I'm seeing here seems to tackle the issues other than the flow of the traffic and the increase in the volume of the traffic. So anything at all that's all enough that seems to tackle that. And we talk about a further assessment after 390 dwellings are developed and looking at the mitigations. What are the mitigations we're talking about that they think are available to them then, that are available to them to serve?
Sorry. Yeah, so in terms of the traffic impacts, we do recognise that traffic is going to increase, and that can impact on things like people's safety. It is within the acceptable limits, so it's what the traffic assessment, the transport assessment was saying. We've got to be mindful that this is an allocated site, so the council allocated the site for development, and they said that it was capable of accommodating 390 new roads. We've put in safeguards in terms of an additional traffic assessment being required for that 390. In terms of improvements, we are relying heavily on active travel improvements because as far as I understand it, there are difficulties in upgrading junctions and roundabouts in that area because of the land that's around it. But there will be new crossings introduced on the B909, upgraded crossings close to Socky Health Centre. And in terms of the active travel routes, we've got control over the core path areas, so that's it's called Catskills and along Castle Bridge Road towards Jellyone Farm. But we would be looking at undertaking further negotiations to try and make more direct routes to places like Deer Park Primary School. So some of those are still in negotiation, and they require other consent processes, and they also require negotiation with private individuals. So some will be delivered direct. So, like I said, in terms of new crossings, that is something that we are putting forward. Others are still on the table.
Can I ask as a supplementary to that, Jacob, are there any plans or perhaps Stuart, any plans to bring controlled crossing, controlled junctions, putting lighting controls in?
So my understanding recollection, there was a kind of list of proposals. So there's a token crossing to go across the B909 and also the A908. These are pedestrian and vulnerable user improvements, which were the subject of a lot of discussion and debate with the agents, as I recall, the last time when we were going through this process, looking at the TA. One section that had to really work hard to do this because we had concerns about traffic volumes, no question about that. But as Jacob reminds us, it's a kind of revisit of a minded to approve sort of thing. So our ability to now say, right, we now want X, Y, and Z is the road from a roads authority is concerned, it's pretty limited. So what's basically set out in the paper is what was basically agreed to mitigate. But I would be lying if I didn't think that I still have traffic volume concerns. What I would say. It wouldn't be right if I just was it's fine, really fine, because I do have concerns. But to say, really high quality active travel routes can positively impact volumes of traffic. Clearly at peak periods where people are going to be trying to get their kids to primary school, for example. So this is where we've got to earn our money as it were and try and get the best outcome in that regard for people, so they're able to access the primary school, able to access the active travel, the main active travel link into Alloa, and at the crossings across the road are perfectly safe. So basically, there's a certain strong encourage, which is valid for the whole of the nation. Strong encourage sustainable travel along the carriers. But I wouldn't disagree that traffic, overall traffic impact in this area is a major concern.
Yeah, thanks for that, Stuart. I'm also wondering about the controlling the flow of traffic into and out of the site itself onto the main arteries. I take it that there are two main exits, one onto the roundabout at Quinns, and the other one onto the B919. Is that correct? Or is it onto the bottom road? I mean, there's a potential, is there not, for traffic being stranded, trying to get out at busy times, or returning in, you know, at peak times of traffic, if in both directions there's flow going, people getting in and out of this new site could be difficult.
I think the master plan indicates that the principal access onto the B909 includes like the sites, yeah. And it's also got its access up onto Cashbridge Road itself, which also then links to Cashbridge Roundabout. So there are two principal routes, so as it were, traffic can escape both ways, but the crossing onto the B909 includes like Robert Lindsay Crossroad, so that the traffic it won't get stranded, as it were, it'll always have a chance.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, the thing you picked up on was a transport question. I just quick on the Cashbridge Church, and I'm conscious that that's suddenly thinking. Keen to know how can a total investigation be, but in terms of the house itself, beyond the use of the materials from the room, what exactly are we getting committed to here? What are you going to get back at the end of this process? The way it's built, so the details stage with this rentals and impact on what we're getting.
So ultimately, you should end up with a faithful reconstruction of the buildings. That's the external areas of Cashbridge House should look as it did in the photograph that I showed you earlier. So it's conditions which guide that. So they will have to work to plans, photographic records. We'll have to appoint somebody that's suitably qualified to manage that process. But you're never going to rebuild the house, you know, in its entirety and bring back that history, but it will be a nod to what was there previously and the legacy of Cashbridge House. So it's a faithful representation of that building. It is meant to look like Cashbridge House, and there are conditions which guide that process.
So just to clarify, we're not talking about the foundation, we're talking about the building itself. Representation of the original building.
Yeah, so the building, everything that's external, not internal though, because as far as I'm aware, there's not very many records of the internal arrangements.
I'd like to look back to the NHS aspect of getting no reply from the NHS. As a result, has a very fiscal responsibility in the matter, but it does rather be a potential problem of pressure on a local facility. Do we have an obligation then to do some kind of assessment of or hit on the local medical facilities and to take that evidence back to NHS and push them for a response that we can then take to the developer?
So there's no obligation on us. We have let them know that this development's coming forward, and we've given them an opportunity to comment. It's up to them whether or not they provide comment. This is people will see the application, they will see the outcome of this planning committee, and we will negotiate with the NHS in our local development plan as to what sites are coming forward, so they will be aware of it. In terms of reasonability, I don't think it's reasonable for us to be consulted on this, given the mandate to approve, because like I said previously, there hasn't been a whole position change, there hasn't been any material changes in that area. So it would be very difficult to introduce something new, even if they had requested it.
Not quite sure I followed the logic there. I'm thinking about the pressure that our residents in the area are going to come on and trying to get appointments, etc. So there's the quality of the service may well go down, simply because NHS hasn't responded. I hear you see Fiona, NHS hasn't responded, and I feel that it's morally wrong for us just to ignore it and say it's not our fault that they didn't respond. I mean, if we see a problem, should we not do something to mitigate it? I'm going to take a comment from Fiona Law, Councillor Law, just now. I think she's going to something to say on this.
Do you agree that the NHS part would be that it'd be money for capital work, so it wouldn't be money to bring in a GP, because that basically works, as far as I'm aware of, a GP gets the funding with the amount of patients that they see that's in the allocation. So even if it would have to be that for the NHS contribution that it's need for capital work, so a new building or whatnot, or a new surgery, it wouldn't actually be funding to bring in more money to get like more GPs to go to practice. It doesn't cover that. It's just the capital works.
So I'm going to pass over to the legal one and Paul.
I believe that is the case, Councillor Law, in my experience. I mean, I think that the situation, and I totally get why you, as representative of your constituent and your constituents are concerned about health provision. I think what we're seeing here is that the planning authority consultants got no response, not for want of trying. Nothing has changed in the intervening period since the initial PPP and the one now. So the bounds of reasonableness, would it be reasonable for the developer to have to up their contributions in the light of that, bearing in mind that the contributions are fairly substantial towards other infrastructure and for the spending organisations and departments who have responded and put their ask in. And if you were to, for example, look to refusal on that, use that for a reason for refusal, and it went to appeal, you might end up with even less contributions for the other elements. So I understand why people are frustrated that the planning authority doesn't spend the money. It's just the system that gets the money in. And we are very, very dependent on the spending bodies engaging and working with us and saying what they need, and then supporting that by the methodology and data that underpins what they need, and then it has to meet the tests set down by law in the circular and being related to the development and being reasonable. So it's not exactly a perfect system, but as Jacob has indicated as part of a previous one, relationships with the health authority and the mechanism with which we engage with them has improved in recent years. We're engaging with them heavily through our new local development plan, which is underway. So things should improve moving forward, if that gives you some comfort, members. Thank you.
Okay. I have a question about Napoleon's call, whatever it's called. Its relocation to the old office buildings on the plan is suitable, I think, and admirable. But if we assume that those buildings will continue to stay as they are, originally on the 2015 plan, that was a housing area. Has that now been washed aside, and that's definitely been retained as a business district, shall say? And do we now have better relationship with better understanding from the developer that buildings will not be knocked down willy-nilly?
So the business and the education use of that part of the site are to remain. They could obviously apply for a planning application, but to change those uses, but in terms of what they're proposing, it shows that they're going to remain. The legal agreement also asks that those buildings will remain within those classes of use. In terms of the Napoleon column, we as a council have to confirm in writing whether it's to remain in that location or not. So we do have a little bit of power there. So that'll probably be a council decision, not a planning decision. Whether or not it's returned to its original location or whether or not it's moved to an alternative location. So there are choices there surrounding the proposal call, and that's in the legal agreement.
Are there any other questions from members? So in that case, I think we'll move on to contributions from external parties. I believe we have people present from the Heritage Trust, and are the applicants here? Is there anyone from online? No?
Yes,
Well,
there's two online.
they're online. Are they going to contribute online?
Yes.
Right, well, we'll hold them in abeyance just now. I'd like to invite the statutory council fees, and I think possibly objectors combined. I think two of you present. Is that
From
correct?
the Financial Heritage Trustees too.
Fine. If you'd like to come up and. You sit there? Yes, please, just beside our officers there. You just introduce yourselves and say who your representative position is. I'll press out the magic button.
Yes, if you just press the buttons, if you finish speaking, if you just push the button off so that others can speak.
Yeah, is that working now? Move it towards you a little bit, but okay. Thanks, yeah.
Hello, is that me? Hello, my name is Matthew Pease. I'm an architect, but I'm also a trustee of the Clackmannanshire Heritage Trust. The trust was established originally as the Alamo Building Preservation Trust in the 1980s. We restored our tower, and then eventually, of course, we handed that over to the National Trust for Scotland. It was then reformed by the council, again with the council framed constitution as the Clackmannanshire Heritage Trust. So we have a remit to seek protection of heritage assets, built and natural. As a result, we've acquired a number of significant buildings. We've got the Thunderbody Old Kirk, we've got Sopping Tower, Johnston Mausoleum. So we have a large number of responsibilities and a task. The council used to support us with a fund each year, but that has dwindled to nothing, so we're left with very little we can do. But the one thing we can do is make the comments on planning applications. In this case, we were aware that there was clearly a risk to Classbridge House at the same time as the application was made. The applicants had applied to Historical Rhine Scotland and have the building delisted so that it can be demolished. So clearly, it was obvious from the start that this was going to be a problem, and that, of course, has come about. We are aware that the council are considering a petition to ask for the rebuilding of Classbridge House. And it's really in respect of that we want to raise our doubts about the whole strategy. As Mr. Muffer said, heritage is one of those things, once it's gone, it's gone. You simply can't rebuild what was there. You can't recreate that heritage. It was built in such a way that it is irreplaceable, and it's gone. We have to accept that. Also, slightly alarmed to hear that we're only talking about the exterior too. It wasn't clear from the condition that we're only talking about the exterior appearance of the building. I understood from this that you were looking to have the whole thing rebuilt properly. But as I say, it's not possible. And if you did, you would be back where you had started. You'd have a building which didn't have a proper use. It's lost its setting. Its original purpose is gone. Clearly, you know, it's unsatisfactory in all sorts of ways. You'd be creating a sort of zombie heritage. It doesn't make sense from a heritage point of view. So we have an alternative suggestion we'd like very gratefully you consider, which is that instead of rebuilding Classbridge, which after all will give the developer an asset which they will benefit from, instead the money that would be put into that, and that's got to be substantial, it's going to be done properly, should be put into a fund instead, which will be used to help save the remaining heritage, dwindling heritage in Clackmannanshire, managed by the council in some way. And the land where the building was should be retained for public use in some way. So we're really asking for a reconsideration of condition number 11 to rethink what should be done and whether we can turn this into something positive rather than something that's really not going to pick up any heritage value of at all.
An interesting suggestion. Thank you very much. I must ask my planning colleagues where we will sit on that and the ability to change the planning condition as a like.
I don't know, Colin, do you want to go on? You look like it. Yeah, so we do understand that you're never going to rebuild the history, so you are rebuilding the legacy to Casterbridge House. It will be a very visual representation. Will be on the same side. It will be in terms of it will be informed by all of the evidence that we've got. So that tends to be evidence of the external appearance, and we don't have much evidence in terms of the interior. And so I'm speaking to the committee. So in terms of fund for regaining heritage, is that for public use? That would have to be negotiated with the developers. So we've got to the point now where they're saying that they will rebuild Casterbridge House, and we couldn't ask for money through the conditions, so you'd be asking for money through the legal agreement. So we'd have to put that back to our solicitors and their solicitors, which is going to slow down the process.
Is this something we should consider?
So we went on the basis of advice from Historic Environment Scotland. There's actually a consultee, or well, the worth of that aspect. Obviously, the listed buildings are gone now. It's very complex because there's a criminal case ongoing as well. So how that impacts on the criminal case as well would be something that we may need to take advice on.
I suppose there are two issues here. One is the desirability of the notion as proposed by Matthew there. And the second one is our ability to renegotiate with the applicant. Those are the two issues. Should it be done and can it be done?
Chair.
Yeah.
I mean, I think my comment in this is it's rather late in the day. And I mean, I share, I'm sure, a lot of you, the elected members, think it is an interesting idea, and it would have been nice to be able to perhaps consider this earlier. I mean, the fear is, as Jacob's outlined, the Historic Environment in Scotland have played a major part in this and got us to this detailed condition. We're in section 75. There is that requirement which the applicant is aware of in this. Well, they haven't signed section 75, but they've signed up to the idea of doing that. My fear would be if the process is then delayed, they would have the possibility to appeal on their own determination, and you might end up with less than actually is being proposed at the moment. So for the committee to actually make a decision saying we want to change that now, I think my advice, and I would want to speak to lawyers as well who are very aware of these kind of situations, which I am not, is to put it and see if it were possible to perhaps change it, and to say that the committee were interested in exploring that. But I wouldn't want to go down a route that basically meant that we ended up with less, that the community and the whole heritage aspect ended up with less than the developers currently committed to, if that makes sense. Thanks.
But is there any merit in asking the members present if this is an area we should pursue as suggested by Pauline?
I mean, yes, I'm happy to, but I would reiterate the same comments that actually Paul has said, and that is the appeal aspect of this. The longer that we continue to delay to determine the application, then what they'll do is they'll appeal the application. And as Pauline has said, and in terms of the recent cases that we have had with the reporter's decision on housing and other aspects of developer contributions, there is that concern around that actually becoming less than what we actually have negotiated. And the current negotiation is we could go and seek a legal opinion in relation to it if that is what elected members were minded to do, but bear in mind that legal opinion will also take time in which to review, so it won't be a quick turnaround.
So is it possible that let's say we were to go on and grant this today, that we could later on subsequently open this discussion?
Let you come in.
Sorry, I was just going to say, so there is obviously the risk element that Pauline and Lee are pointing out. It's taken, it's taken all my time since I've worked here, so it's taken at least 2 years to get to where we are today in terms of the legal agreement. In terms of the knock-on effects as well. There will be impacts on others if this is delayed further. So there are people that are operating on this site which are waiting on funding, that have had funding allocated, which are not material to the planning decision, but it's just to be aware that it could, by delaying the process, it might have knock-on impacts for others that are involved as well.
What part of the process is being delayed? I mean, if we grant permission today, rather than open a discussion.
So if we enter into a legal agreement that is both parties agreeing that legally, we can change legal agreements, but that is at the agreement of both. So you could issue a decision today based on that legal agreement and sign the legal agreement and then change that later down the line. But there's nothing that guarantees the other party to, you know, to agree with us and sign that legal agreement.
I understand that 100%. If there's no agreement, no subsequent agreement reached, then we're no worse off than we are just now. But we've explored an avenue which has been suggested. It might actually be a win-win all round in some ways. And I'm going to bring in Councillor Quinn.
Hi. I'm wondering then, along the lines of what you're saying, Councillor Coyne, and can we agree and then just kind of approach the development to see if they're open to the idea? Because they're not open to the idea, then obviously it's going to be a lengthy whatever, but they might potentially be open to it. And then we could possibly look at it. And but it also depends if we are interested or not in doing this, because if we're not, then there's no point having a discussion any further. If we're interested in going and approaching them and asking if, you know, seeking if this is something we want to pursue potentially, then I guess we should do that.
That's the question. Yeah.
So maybe we could suggest something along the lines of we've obviously got what's in the section 75 to rebuild Carsbridge House, to introduce something we say that members are requesting that should that not prove feasible or realistic, that the developers would consider a contribution to heritage assets in Clackmannanshire around an equivalent cost. And kind of leave it like that, and then they seek the legal advice and look at the negotiations, but put a time limit on the signing of the section 75, quite a strict time limit, because then, you know, for all the risk elements that have been outlined here, and make it clear that it's got to be done in quite a tight time frame. I mean, in the end of the day, it looks like potentially the developer would not be penalised for that, because, you know, it's the same amount of money, which is what you're really suggesting. It's not going to be cheap to rebuild the house, and it's not going to ever replicate what we said anyway, for the reason the Heritage Trust is very eloquently laid out. But I think basically what we're saying is we want to explore it, but we don't, and we want to look at all the legal aspects of it, but we don't want to delay it. So that we cover the idea, we explore it, don't expose the council and, you know, the community to the risk of losing the heritage asset. And perhaps other aspects of the section 75 if it's not signed timelessly. So if members are right with that, I think we need to get a formal amendment to the report, because your amendment, sorry.
You need to, somebody need to formally amend the report, because what you're doing is you're amending the heads of terms that has basically been presented to the elected members with a view to changing what ultimately is the rebuild Carsbridge House. I think maybe worthwhile, I know that we've got a couple of elected members. I've got Jacob want to come back in again. Is that okay, Chair?
Sorry, I just wanted to get the point. There is a criminal investigation ongoing and the market recourse for that, which might include monetary penalties. And whether or not it's a good precedent to set in terms of knocking down a listed building and then just paying essentially a fine or some money. This is going to be a rebuilt Carsbridge House. I know there will be issues historically with that in terms of its legacy, but in terms of setting a precedent and protecting all of the other historic buildings that we've got that potentially might end up on a development site at some stage. We've got to tread carefully, I'd suggest.
I hear you, but I don't understand the precedent concern, because any fiscal penalty applied by the justice system is outside of this discussion, in a sense. At the moment, as it stands, the developer will be building a house and maybe paying a fine. The alternative is they might be putting money in a pot and paying a fine. I don't really see we're setting a dangerous precedent. We're not encouraging people to knock down buildings and then just hand over some money for a heritage fund. The legal side still applies. We're not removing that. If the fact says we should.
Got councillor time.
Sorry, the council time.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just a bit concerned about being changes. I absolutely support what's being proposed here because it seems to make total sense. However, I'm worried that if we make too many changes to this section 75 and then it ties us into things that were never originally suggested, that just as Pauline and Ray have suggested, there is the potential for appeal. If we delay, if the changes result in a delay, I'm worried that in 2 years' time we're going to be sitting here with no asset whatsoever. So I think we need to be very, very careful if we want to change the word in section 75, change what Nicholas and Perry recommended to us, and make sure that we're not tying ourselves into some kind of legal wrangle that can get out of it.
I think that's a fair point. Anyone else want to make a contribution to that for Councillor McCarthy? Thanks, Chair. It's an interesting proposal, and I get the argument that the gentleman made in terms of you can't rebuild heritage and stuff like that, but having seen the massive sort of public opinion when the house was demolished, I would wonder what the wider public opinion would be on not having another house rebuilt. And I'm not sure how comfortable I am making that decision on behalf of it. And that's not to diminish your position in terms of trust, that's not what I mean. But I would wonder what the wider public opinion would be on that in terms of not having a house rebuilt, and rather than having a pot, like a sum of money put into a pot in lieu of that. And I think that's something that we kind of need to consider as well here.
100%. Councillor Fairley.
Thanks, Chair. That's very similar to the point Councillor is making. That I am fully sympathise with the position put forward by the Alternatives Group and Stephen Nett in the proposal. My concern is the decision we took around trying to enforce the rebuild of that building was based on a really widespread public reaction to that building being taken down, and it was really important time for us to ensure that was secured through that process. So I don't feel ready to give up on that at this stage. So we're going forward today that it's presented on an either or option to the developer, which for them, the cost is the same. It's about what does the end game look like. That decision still needs to come back to us, I think, because the committee insisted on that being something we wanted to see in place. And I think, I'll go ahead on the conversation that they're open to doing an either or arrangement to that. We still need to make a formal decision around what is the best of those two options for us, because I am concerned about the widespread reaction.
I agree. And I think the safest thing for us to do is at this point, and having listened to him, I think remove it for discussions, in fact, because if it's going to cause problems with the community vote, if you like, or appetite for it, issues with the possibilities of appeal, etc., that we should not impede the process any further. But I think that we should, after this is over, that we should then take that idea forward, see if there's mileage in it with the public and with the developer outside of this discussion. So I think that's an end of the topic now, because it's contributing more to this discussion, but it's not gone away. I think we can make the change at the moment simply. Personally, Tiger.
If we agree today on the recommendations that are in the paper, that prevents us from taking this to another stage in the future, because we're making an agreement. We agree in the conditions that are in the paper, and then we can no longer agree with that.
Unilaterally, you're absolutely right. But two contracting parties can agree mutually to change the contract. That's something in the future, if they so wish to do. We're not imposing anything on the developer at all here by this idea. You're looking askance. You want to speak?
Do you want to speak? Sorry. So the recommendations are the heading terms that are set in Appendix 2. The Appendix 2 says that Carsbridge House required favorable reconstruction of Carsbridge House. That's the decision that you're making today. If you were looking to, restraining to legals, which I'm not comfortable discussing in the public domain, but you're right, two parties can unilaterally agree to change a section 75. But those two parties, as you say, have got to be in agreement. If you are asking the developer now to basically reconstruct Carsbridge House as part of this decision process, that is exactly what they will do. But if you're asking the applicant to look at that either or option, you're wanting to do this, but maybe we want you to do that. That's the bit. I think we need to be clear on what exactly it is being suggested by elected members in terms of these heads of terms from a legal perspective, and the decision that is being made by the planning committee. That would be my concern.
I'm not suggesting that we can force this at all. The developers are listening to this conversation at home, so they're aware of having this conversation. So they might not be surprised if, after all this is signed off or whatever, we come chapping the door and saying, look, you fancy another discussion about changing things. I can't see that it makes very much difference to their lives either way. I don't think we're creating a problem. If I'm wrong, tell me, but I can't see why discussing this after the fact is an issue. Does anyone want to comment on that? As earliest.
So as Chairman, like I said, with the developers and how you respond to this, it's very, it's not really right now. By trying to make the changes, having comfortable with us on the head, making a decision on making on the speaker today. And after the debate, having a conversation with the developer, that they need to, something they can come back because there's an agreement with others. But I wouldn't want to get us trying to make a decision today, move this forward and get a system.
What you just said is exactly what I was suggesting. I'm suggesting it wasn't good. We don't have an amendment. I'm not proposing an amendment today. That's why I'm saying that if we accept that we're not going to amend this, then we stop this discussion now. And it continues at some later date.
Sorry, Jacob, Chair. I was just going to say that the application is a balanced assessment. So yes, Carsbridge House is one aspect of that, but obviously there's all the other things that he's bringing to the mix. So the house will need education provisions, all these other things. So it's a balanced assessment based on the information that we've got now. I'd suggest that this is new information that we haven't been presented with, and also that the applicants have not been presented with. So making a decision on the application that we've got today in front of us is probably the safest route.
Are you agreeing with it? But what I'm saying, I'm suggesting now to us all that we, for the moment, pretend this conversation never took place.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. And then it can take place after. Are we all agreed? Yes. Right, good. Matthew, thank you for your presentation. Most interesting. And I hope there may be something in the future for it.
Can I just say one other thing, which is that the Heritage Trust, as I say, is set up by the council. We've worked to a council remit. We try and recruit trustees from the local area who have a local interest. Many of you will know Kaylee here, involved in the project. We also try and engage skills that we need, legal. We have architects with advanced conservation accreditation. We have a number of skills which are available to the council if they wish to engage with us. We certainly invited that in our first projection, and again when Carsbridge House was demolished. But we weren't engaged, we weren't invited to contribute at all. And so this situation, which is clearly a problem, needing to have happened. I think if you know, we could offer this at an earlier stage, if that had been helpful. So can I just make a plea that if we have similar cases, we are available, we can contribute some knowledge, experience, and maybe it will help these situations.
Thank you, Matthew. Well,
got the ears of a number of people that could perhaps take advantage of that offer. Thank you, Rob. Thank you both.
What was late? No, sorry,
You're not online either, is she? Right, so we'll go straight on to the applicants. The applicants are online just now and they wish to have a 10-minute opportunity to contribute. Can you switch your cameras on, applicants? If for any reason you can't do that, can you raise your hand so that we know you're there? Lucy Green.
Hi there, how you doing?
Right, thank you, Lindsay. Good to see you. You're going to speak for the applicants then for 10 minutes.
Yeah, well, just firstly, we weren't aware we were allowed to speak today. We didn't actually request that, but I will take the opportunity just to address some of the points that have come up today. Firstly, on Carsbridge House, in terms of the demolition, we took title to this site on the 21st of June 2020. Looking into the history of Carsbridge House, it hadn't been occupied since the mid-80s, and it had obviously been subject to a number of fires within that period. Now, I did ask for some time with all the councillors. I even offered to put on a meeting locally in the local town hall for members of the community, etc., so that we could explain the situation. And unfortunately, that fell on deaf ears, and I wasn't allowed to almost defend our position. So we do appreciate the history of Carsbridge House, and it was very much not a decision that was taken lightly. It was taken because of safety. And I don't know if everyone's aware, but we had a child that was put into an induced coma because they'd managed to enter the site. With us being on site working at the time, they still managed to enter the site. We tried to defend it as much as we could. They were drunk, under the influence of alcohol, and fell off the roof of Carsbridge House, and they were put into an induced coma. Now, for us, that was an extremely serious situation. Following that, we had just relentless vandalism on the site. So when it came to the point that we were in a situation where the building was just completely unsafe, we took advice from an engineer. We also, obviously the council engineers looked at it as well. We had no option but to take that house down, because I would rather be sitting in front of you guys justifying myself and the Procurator Fiscal than two parents that had lost their children. And that's the decision that we took. It wasn't a reckless, we're just going to take this house down and deal with the fine, etc. after, as was discussed before. So I hope that gives you a bit of insight and understanding on how we arrived at the position. In terms of the heritage and the change to the Section 75, I know we've parked that and we can deal with that later. What I will say is we are absolutely open to discussion on that after the fact. However, like you guys, I wouldn't want to see a further delay, considering we're now 6 years in to this process from when we took title to the site. But we have tried to work with you guys and make joint decisions, make sure it works for both parties. So again, we are entirely open to that further discussion down the line. But I would urge that we can move forward from today. We have lots of interest in the site. It's going to bring a lot of income to the local area as well, in terms of council tax, all that good stuff, lots of benefits. Another point I wanted to address was you were concerned about Harvey House and the offices in the middle of the site. We are going through a purchase at the moment, so Resonate will take full title to those buildings. Therefore, Advanced Construction, us as the owner, won't have any ongoing responsibility. So there is no risk of us putting an application in to demolish those. They will be safeguarded by Resonate, and I see Angela there. And I know she's been quite vocal with members of the council on that. We are governed by a time constraint in terms of funding for Resonate, so we're keen to get that underway, and we do need the Section 75 agreed and signed to allow that to happen. So that's all I wanted to say today, and thank you very much everybody for your time that you've put into this application so far.
Lindsay, thank you very much for that contribution and your explanation. Let's move on now. Oh yes. Did you want to ask the applicant any questions then or back?
But myself right now, I have to say,
No.
Sorry?
that would be helpful right now, I have to say.
Because you would like to ask a question, would you? I'll ask Lindsay to come back in again. Yes.
Yeah.
Lindsay, we've got one question for the law.
That's the mark, so that's one of the legal discussions as to why council officers were when we were there on site, but I don't know if that is when it's a legal thing, so I will ask the question.
You're not going to ask a question?
No.
No. Sorry, Miss Lindsay, no question.
No bother.
Right. Wasn't taking right. Any questions? I'm either forward, what's the paper? Looking for a seconder. Vice, thank you. Right, does anyone wish to debate the paper? Councillor Law.
I don't know the debate, but I have to say, I'm blown away. I didn't think there'd be any kind of Donald Trump style justifications of what I've just heard as to what's transpired. But also just as well, just when we were at that previous discussion, that it just kind of upsets me in regards to the planning process that we could be lose things if we decided to go down that previous track of what was given, if it went to the reporter, that again, that we would have, it could be a detrimental effect on something that wasn't what we've done. It was done on the land. I just think that it's shown how the public can lose trust in the planning process, and I think it does need kind of more work done at Scottish Government level to kind of put protections in for these kind of processes. But I suppose it's not really that application, but I'm happy for it to go forward or not, but it's just.
So bottom line is you're saying you're supporting the paper.
Yeah, I'm supporting it.
Thank you.
Listen,
Anyone else wish to comment, contribute? Councillor Fairley.
Just correct me, Chair, just to say, for the paper as well, I probably just want to comment on that. I think the contribution from Heritage Trust, and I recognise that has a valuable potential. I just wish to come forward earlier enough was to want both to consult amongst themselves, but in general public too, whether or not that was the right road going forward from. In the absence of the fact that it hasn't come in time being another encouraging choice on today, so approve this paper.
Thank you. Well, are we going to support the paper? Show of hands, quick show of hands. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Right, at this point, we'll have a break, 10 minutes to refresh and that will reconvene at 5:30.